There are fires that never die out. The fire of hatred, of injustice, buried beneath the ashes of history. And sometimes, to find justice, souls return, turning the innocent into tools for the flame of vengeance. Welcome to Whisper Horror Channel, where the most chilling stories are retold, where forgotten mysteries are unveiled. Today, we will take you to an ancient town, where a dark past still lurks in every breath. A family has moved there, and they have no idea that they are becoming part of a sentence written in fire. This story will reveal a fire, lit by souls that cannot pass on. Boo. There's one thing you need to know: in journeys to find truth and salvation, sometimes, you will encounter a figure. A wanderer between two worlds, called the Dead Walker. He seeks no glory, no forgiveness. He only follows the call of pain, of unresolved injustices. And the story you are about to hear is one of the pieces in his eternal journey. Listen carefully, because every whisper, every strange sound, could be a sign. A sign that you are entering the world of the Dead Walker, where the haunting has only just begun. The Blackwood family, Daniel, Claire, and their young daughter Lily, stood at the threshold of a new life. Daniel Blackwood, a 45-year-old man with a tall stature and keen eyes hidden behind metal-rimmed glasses, was a talented historian, specializing in historical cases, especially unresolved wrongful accusations. He was a man of reason, always believing in truth and concrete evidence, dismissing anything mystical or spiritual. Daniel's work had brought him to the Salem Historical Museum, Massachusetts, a town famous for its dark history and stories of witches from the 17th century. For Daniel, this was a golden opportunity to delve deeper into local history, seeking new clues for his research. Accompanying Daniel was Claire Blackwood, 42, his wife with shimmering brown hair and deep blue eyes that always held a dreamy look. Claire was a ceramic artist with a sensitive soul, easily moved by mystical things. She had strong intuition, often sensing things others didn't, but always tried to ignore them, forcing herself to believe in scientific, concrete things, so as not to contradict her husband. However, the ancient atmosphere and chilling legends of Salem held a strange allure for Claire, an allure that was both captivating and unsettling. Their lives were brightened by Lily Blackwood, their 8-year-old daughter, an active girl with braided hair and a bright, radiant smile. Lily loved exploring everything around her, from vibrant butterflies in the garden to fairy tales about princesses. But Lily was also easily haunted by ghost stories and legends, partly because of the stories Daniel often told her as vivid history lessons, and partly because of the innate sensitivity she inherited from her mother. The Blackwood family excitedly moved into an old house on the outskirts of Salem, a 3-story house with dark wooden architecture and faded frosted glass windows. The house was near a dense forest, rumored to be the site of famous 17th-century witch trials and executions. For Daniel, this was an ideal place to live and conduct research. He believed this historical atmosphere would help him immerse himself in ancient documents, uncovering buried truths. As soon as they stepped into their new home, a strange scent enveloped Claire, making her shiver slightly. It was a pungent smell, like burning herbs and damp earth, mixed with something eerily sweet. Like the scent of something that had once existed and decomposed long ago. Claire wrinkled her nose, a feeling of discomfort creeping in. Daniel, being practical, simply thought it was the smell of an old house, accumulated dampness over many years of vacancy. He waved his hand, dismissing his wife's idle thoughts. But Claire couldn't help but wonder. This scent was not like ordinary old smells. It had a strange haunting quality, like a whisper from the past. The first night in their new home, a heavy rain poured down, wind whistling through the old cracks in the doors, creating strange sounds. Lily, after a long day exploring the new house, fell asleep. Round midnight, her cries echoed, waking Daniel and Claire. They rushed into Lily's room. She sat bolt upright in bed, eyes wide in the dark, trembling as she said she heard someone whispering under tea. He floor, calling her name, and the sound of roots crawling. The whisper was not like a normal voice, but a strange melody, like an ancient lullaby, echoing from deep underground. Daniel and Claire tried to calm their daughter, thinking it was due to the sounds of the old house in the rainy night, or Lily's rich imagination. Daniel even explained about old plumbing systems or rodent noises, trying to find a scientific reason for everything. But deep down, Claire felt an indescribable unease, a feeling that something was wrong. As Claire began redecorating Lily's room a few days later, trying to dispel the gloomy atmosphere of the old house, she made a chilling discovery. On Lily's windowsill, hidden beneath layers of peel-in paint, was a strange symbol. It was a complex drawing, like an ancient charm or spell, deeply carved into the wood grain. The lines were sharp, not something a child or an ordinary person could create. The symbol evoked a gruesome feeling, a connection to mysterious things. Claire didn't know what it was, but a strong intuition told her it wasn't a harmless decorative drawing. It was like a mark, a seal, or a summoning that had been carved into the very heart of this house, and perhaps it was related to the witch legends for which Salem was famous. Claire decided to keep this discovery a secret from Daniel, afraid that he would again dismiss it with his rational explanations. She felt an invisible thread pulling their family into a dark past of which they were completely unaware. Just a few weeks after the Blackwood family moved into the ancient house in Salem, the peaceful atmosphere began to dissipate. Lily, the lively 8-year-old girl, suddenly fell mysteriously ill. She had a persistent high fever, her body burning hot like fire, and was constantly delirious. The most terrifying thing was that Lily coughed up tiny black particles, looking exactly like ash, even though here was no fireplace or any source of ash in the house. Local doctors at Salem General Hospital were baffled. They couldn't find a clear cause, suggesting it might be a severe allergy or a strange sickness. But conventional treatments had no effect. The helplessness of modern medicine plunged Daniel and Claire into extreme anxiety. In her delirium, Lily incessantly whispered strange phrases in an ancient voice, not the innocent voice of an 8-year-old girl. The voice was deep and muffled, as if echoing from a distant era, mention the fire, the promised land, and betrayal. She constantly scratched her skin, her small fingernails leaving red streaks on her arms and neck, as if trying to escape something invisible hidden within her body. Daniel tried to record his daughter's mumblings, hoping to find some scientific clue, but he only felt a sense of helplessness as the words slipped beyond his rational comprehension. Claire, on the other hand, felt a deeper fear. She hugged her daughter tightly, a mother's intuition telling her this was no ordinary illness. Claire, with her keen intuition, began to notice small but terrifying details around Lily. She found tiny black ash particles on Lily's bedsheets, in the folds of her pajamas. These ash particles were not like kitchen ash or cigarette ash, but had a pungent smell, exactly like the strange scent she had smelled as soon as she entered the old house. The smell of burning herbs and damp earth, mixed w. It's something eerily sweet, as if it were the remnants of a fire that had blazed long ago. Ash particles also appeared in the drawings Lily had made before falling ill, scribbled drawings of figures. Surrounded by black spots, a chilling coincidence. Claire realized this ash didn't come from somewhere outside, it came from Lily's own body, a horrifying sign that something was burning inside her. Daughter. Daniel, still trying to find a rational explanation for his daughter's illness, decided to plant a small oak tree in the garden, hoping to bring new life to the house and ward off bad luck. As he was digging under the oldest oak tree in the garden, an ancient oak with massive roots, clinging to the earth like tentacles, his shovel hit something hard. He dug deeper and found an old, charred wood box, almost completely rotted, buried deep beneath tangled tree roots. Inside the box, he found a braid of human hair, dried and faded, along with a tattered piece of cloth embroidered with strange symbols, almost completely decayed. Daniel, with his knowledge as a historian, immediately recognized these as items used in ancient witch rituals. He knew Salem was the site of infamous witch trials. But finding these items right under his house was too terrifying a coincidence, a suggestion of a dark past buried right beneath their feet. He showed them to Claire, and her face turned pale as she realized they shared the same pungent smell as the ash and the house. Fear slowly crept into Daniel's rational mind. He began to doubt. Lily's whispers, the black ash particles, the charred wooden box, and the ancient witch artifacts, all seemed to connect, forming a terrifying picture that defied all scientific explanation. Daniel stared intently at the items in his hand, feeling a cold current run down his spine, as if he were touching a piece of accursed past, a past that was coming alive and demanding payment from his own family. Lily's condition grew increasingly serious, beyond the capabilities of local doctors. She continued to have a high fever, coughed up ash, and fell deeper into a coma. Daniel and Claire, with broken hearts, had to take their daughter to Salem General Hospital, a larger medical facility, hoping to find answers. Yet, even here, doctors were at a loss for diagnosis and treatment. All tests yielded terrifyingly normal results, no signs of infection, virus, or pathology that could explain Lily's condition. She simply wasted away, like a dying candle. In Lily's hospital room, a chilling and eerie atmosphere began to permeate, defying all laws of physics. The room temperature inexplicably soared, causing air conditioning units to work at full capacity, but still unable to lower the suffocating heat. Then objects in Lily's room, from soft stuffed animals to pristine white bed sheets, suddenly smoldered without any visible flame. Only thick, pungent black smoke rose, along with the acrid smell of burning fabric and wood. When nurses and doctors rushed in a panic, everything returned to normal in an unbelievable way, with no trace of smoke or burning. Lily lay there, still in a coma, but her lips slightly moved, whispering weakly, "My friend likes fire." Those words were not just the delirium of a seriously ill child, but a chilling declaration, confirming the presence of an invisible entity clinging to Lily and capable of manipulating temperature and matter. While Claire clung to her daughter in the hospital with extreme fear, Daniel rushed into the Salem Historical Library like a madman. He was no longer seeking scientific explanations for Lily's illness. He wanted to learn about Elara Thorne, the woman he had found information about in the old diary and the witch artifacts under the oak tree. He believed the key to saving his daughter lay in the dark past of this town. He rummaged through ancient records, decaying books, forbidden documents. Finally, he found detailed records of the 1692 witch trials. A woman named Elara Thorne, accused of witchcraft, had been burned alive at the stake in the forest where their house was located. All evidence, all testimonies against her were full of contradictions and fear. But what haunted Daniel the most was the description of the victim's illnesses in those records. Symptoms such as high fever, delirium, coughing up black ash, and scratches on the skin perfectly matched what Lily was experiencing. Neil shivered. The curse was not a legend. It was a living truth. The haunting of Elara Thorne was not limited to the pages of history books. One night, as Daniel stayed late at the library, trying to piece together the fragments of the past, his phone suddenly rang. The screen displayed his home phone number. Daniel frowned. He knew Claire was at the hospital with Lily, and the house was empty. A cold sensation ran down his spine. He answered, and what he heard was not a familiar voice. There was only the static of a weak signal, then the faint, weak groaning of a woman, full of pain, interspersed with continuous metallic clanging, like the sound of iron chains being dragged across a stone floor. The groaning was prolonged, full of sorrow, like the echo of a tormented soul. The call abruptly ended with a child's clear, cold, piercing giggle. That laugh echoed in Daniel's mind, sending chills down his spine. He dropped the phone, his palms drenched in sweat. It wasn't a line error. It was Elara Thorne calling, and who was that giggling child? Returning to the house late at night, Daniel's fear had surpassed all rational barriers. He walked through each room, feeling watched. The smell of burning herbs and damp earth, the pungent scent clay had smelled since they first moved in, was now more pungent than ever. He tried to calm himself, but every small sound in the house made him jump. He remembered Lily's whisper in her delirium, "My friend likes fire." And then, his gaze stopped at Lily's window, where Claire had found the ancient charm symbol. Though he had tried to erase it, the symbol now appeared clearer, like an indelible SCAR, faintly glowing in the dark. Daniel understood that his family was being drawn into a vortex of vengeance, a curse ignited by the unjust fires of the past. He could no longer deny the existence of the supernatural. He had to save his daughter, no matter the cost. The ancient book with Elara Thorne's chilling message, "Fire does not destroy me. Fire only turns me into memory. And memory will return," was like an invisible judgment, deeply etched into Daniel's mind. The rationality of a historian had completely crumbled before the inexplicable phenomena. He understood that science was helpless, and his daughter was imprisoned by an injustice from centuries ago. Faced with Claire's despair and Lily's life hanging by a thread, Daniel made a decision he never thought he would make. He accepted Claire's advice, seeking out someone capable of dealing with ritual matters. That night, after visiting Lily in the hospital, Daniel drove home through the dense darkness of Salem. He needed time to prepare himself, and he needed a quiet place to think about the person he was about to meet. As the car turned onto the small road leading to the edge of the forest, a familiar chilling sensation washed over him again. The air became unusually cold, and the pungent smell of burning herbs and damp earth became more intense than ever, as if the entire forest had brought its breath inside. Daniel stared at the ancient trees, feeling as if hundreds of invisible eyes were watching him from deep within the darkness. He slowed down, his heart pounding in his chest. The car's headlights cut through the night, illuminating the gnarled tree trunks. Suddenly, he saw something that sent chills down his spine. Amidst the tree trunks, faint reddish-orange specks of light flickered, like distant fire. They weren't real fire, but ghostly lights, dancing wildly, reflecting through thin mist hanging in the forest. They looked exactly like the fire in Lily's drawings, and from the stories of witches being burned alive. Daniel knew that those lights were the embodiment of Inju's Tice, the unquenchable fire of Elara Thorne and those who shared her fate. Daniel continued driving, trying to ignore the ghostly lights. But as he sped up, a chilling sound pierced his mind, not an echo from outside, but from within his own head. From deep within the forest, he heard a clear, cold lullaby. It wasn't the normal lullaby mothers sing to their children. It was an ancient, mournful melody, mixed with the sound of wind whistling and mournful weeping, like the echo of hundreds of suffering souls. The singing repeated a single name, Lily. Lily. The singing permeated every nerve cell in Daniel, making him feel as if thousands of needles were piercing his brain. He squeezed his eyes shut for a second, then opened them, trying to focus on the road. He knew that what he was hearing was not a hallucination. It was Elara Thorne, or other souls, calling his daughter's name, pulling her into their world. When Daniel finally got home, he was almost exhausted. His ancient house, once a symbol of peace, now became a trap, a dwelling place for unjustly tormented souls. The pungent smell of burning herbs and damp earth was now more pungent than ever, as if the entire forest had brought its breath inside. He walked in the dark, feeling cold touches on his skin, invisible whispers echoing in his ears. He understood that his only choice was not to fight, but to find someone who could help him understand and deal with these things. He called an old friend, a folklorist in Salem with whom he had collaborated on some small projects. He didn't believe in ghosts but knew a lot about legends and people capable of solving spiritual problems in the area. After hearing Daniel's frantic story, the friend introduced him to a special person, a mysterious man, with no clear identity, who often wandered around helping people with spiritual problems. That person was known as Gabriel. Daniel didn't have many options. He could only put his trust in a stranger, someone he, with his rational nature, never thought he would need. He knew he was stepping into a world he had never dared to imagine, a world of unjustly tormented souls and fires that never die. He only hoped that Gabriel could save his daughter, before Lily was completely consumed by the darkness from the past. Daniel waited anxiously. The call to his old friend about Gabriel was his last hope, a final straw to cling to in this fierce storm. He didn't know what Gabriel would look like, or if the mysterious and could truly help Lily. But despair had driven him beyond all reason. The next morning, a gaunt figure appeared in the hospital corridor, where Daniel and Claire were sitting listlessly. It was a man about 50 years old, with a haggard face and bony features, deep eyes. Hat held an indescribable sadness but also a sharp intelligence. His long, straggly hair, old, faded clothes made him look like a wandering beggar, yet he exuded a peculiar aura, an inexplicable mist. He didn't resemble any priest or spiritualist Daniel had ever imagined. The man was Gabriel. He calmly walked forward, his gaze resting on Daniel and Claire, then directed straight towards Lily's hospital room. Daniel stood up, introduced himself and his wife, and then quickly recounted everything, from moving into the old house, the strange phenomena, Lily's mysterious illness, to the discove rise about Elara Thorne and the curse of fire. He spoke hurriedly, full of panic, but Gabriel listened in silence, his eyes unblinking, only gleaming with a deep understanding, as if he had known it all along. When Daniel finished, Gabriel said nothing. He simply nodded slightly, then slowly walked towards Lily's hospital room. As soon as Gabriel entered Lily's room, a cold and heavy energy enveloped the space, making Daniel and Claire shiver. It was the sensation of a malevolent presence, a soul trapped in hatred. Gabriel approached Lily's bed. He placed his gaunt hand on her forehead. His eyes closed slightly, and Daniel could see his body tremble. Then Gabriel opened his eyes, his deep eyes looking at Lily, then turned to Daniel and Claire, his voice deep but strangely resonant. She is not sick. She is possessed. A soul is living in your daughter. Gabriel's confirmation, though terrifying, brought Daniel a strange sense of relief. Finally, someone believed him, finally someone understood what was happening. Gabriel began to chant. He carried no religious items other than a tattered, old leather-bound Bible, which he clutched tightly in his hand. His chanting voice was not the monotonous drone of a typical priest, but a deep, powerful, undulating melody, like an ancient hymn echoing from the depths of the soul. As soon as the chanting echoed, Lily suddenly convulsed violently on the bed, scratching at the air, her small fingernails tearing at the bedsheets. She coughed up larger, thicker black ash particles, scattering them around. The voice in her throat distorted, growling threats in Old English, calling Daniel and Claire by vulgar, hateful terms. That was Elara Thorne resisting, fighting back. While Gabriel was chanting, a small, faint scar on his wrist, where he had once been burned in a mysterious house fire, suddenly ached and turned red. Daniel could clearly see the veins under his skin bulge, as if some energy was flowing through the scar, connecting Gabriel to Elara Thorne's soul. This was a sign that there was a strange connection between Gabriel's tragic past and unjustly tormented souls. Gabriel, this man, was not just a mere exorcist. He was a man carrying his own scars from a tragic past. As Gabriel's chanting grew stronger, the medical equipment in the room began to malfunction, screens flickering continuously, the beep-beep of the heart rate monitor becoming chaotic. The smell of burning herbs and damp earth was more pungent than ever, as if Elara's invisible fire was raging. Gabriel, with a resolute gaze, did not flinch. He knew he was facing a deeply resentful soul, but he also knew he was the only one who could help. This was not just about saving Lily, but also a part of his own journey of atonement, a way to pay the blood debt he believed he had incurred. Gabriel's intense confrontation with Elara Thorne's spirit in Lily's hospital room left an atmosphere of extreme tension. Although Daniel and Claire didn't fully comprehend everything that had happened, they felt the brutal power of the entity haunting their daughter, and Gabriel's incredible resilience. Gabriel's crucifix, a symbol of faith and protection, had been distorted by Elara's invisible fire, proving the power of this witch's spirit surpassed anything he had ever faced. Lily remained in a deep coma, a sign that the battle was far from over. Gabriel, after regaining his breath, explained to Daniel and Claire in a hoarse, weary but equally resolute voice. He said that, although he could temporarily dispel the spirit's manifestations, the hospital, with its sterile environment and chaotic life energy, was not the place to perform a thorough purification ritual for an ancient witch's spirit like Elara. Elara's spiritual power was too strong and bound to a specific location, a primordial energy source from which she drew her power. To truly free Elara and save Lily, they needed to confront the spirit at its very source of power, the bond between the spirit and the physical world was strongest. Gabriel looked at Daniel and Claire, his gaze fixed on Daniel. He said that their house, where Elara was burned and where her personal artifacts carrying her spiritual power were buried, was the source of power they needed to find. That place was not just an old house, but also a portal connecting to Elara Thorne's tragic past. Gabriel said he sensed a much stronger energy lurking beneath the house, a place where witch power had been concentrated and sealed long ago. He called it the secret cellar underground, a place here Salem's history still lived. When Gabriel spoke of the cellar, a flash of insight struck Daniel. He suddenly recalled a detail he had once read in a faded historical record, an ancient map he had glanced at in the Salem Historica library. That map was not an official document, but a hand-drawn sketch, strangely depicting the area of his house. On it, there was a small inscription scribbled in a corner, "Where ashes burn, it is never the end. It is only the door to eternity." He had never understood its meaning until now. Now, that sentence echoed in his head, bearing a chilling and astonishingly precise meaning. He began to feel a deep curiosity mixed with fear, about what might be hidden beneath his house. Claire, the mother with keen intuition, made another discovery, undeniable evidence. She remembered Lily's drawings in her delirium, drawings of fire and the bound woman. But there was one drawing the girl had made in the first few days, which Claire had accidentally overlooked, thinking it was just childish scribbles. She retrieved that drawing, and to her horror, realized it wasn't an image or fire, but a detailed diagram of the house, drawn with surprising accuracy down to every room and pathway. And at a specific underground location, there was a blazing red X, marking the position of the secret cellar that no one in the family had ever known existed. It seemed Elara Thorne's spirit had used Lily's own hand to guide them, to lead them to the source of the injustice. With undeniable evidence from Gabriel, from Daniel's memory, and Lily's drawing, Daniel and Claire understood that they had to return to their home, to confront the secret underground. This decision didn't come from courage, but from boundless love for Lily and the despair of watching their daughter slowly fade away. They didn't know what awaited them in that cellar, but they knew it was the only chance to free their daughter from the grip of a dark past. They had to go, and they had to face the centuries-old injustice. Daniel and Claire had found the location of the secret underground cellar, a place where centuries of injustice had been buried. However, Gabriel asserted that Elara Thorne was too powerful for him to handle alone, or for Daniel and Claire to resolve on their own. The witch's spirit had accumulated hatred for too long, and its power surpassed all predictions. To perform a thorough purification rite and free Elara's soul, they needed the support of people with strong faith and deep understanding of Salem's spiritual history, people who had inherited knowledge of ancient rituals. Gabriel suggested Daniel and Claire contact the old St. Jude Church, a towering gray stone edifice not far from their house. He explained that St. Jude Church was not just an ordinary place of worship, but a Yuri of inherited secrets, knowledge of ancient exorcism rituals, not to fight or destroy demons, but to purify souls. The clergy there, especially the old priests, were believed to hold secrets about Salem's spiritual balance. Daniel and Claire, with a glimmer of hope remaining, went to St. Jude Church. They met Father Jeremiah, an elderly priest, with a stern face and skeptical eyes. When Daniel presented his story, from Eily's mysterious illness, the supernatural phenomena in the house, to Gabriel's appearance and the discoveries about Elara Thorne, Father Jeremiah listened coldly. He immediately dismissed everything. He said that the church had abandoned pagan rituals like witch exorcism long ago. Their doctrine focused only on faith and salvation, unrelated to superstitious matters. Daniel felt a heavy disappointment. Their offer of help was flatly rejected, and Father Jeremiah's eyes looked at them with judgment, as if they were madmen. However, Gabriel, who had silently accompanied them and observed Father Jeremiah, sensed a deep concealment. His eyes were sharp as he looked at the church's ancient stone pillars. He pointed to an science symbol faintly carved on one of the large stone pillars, a symbol Daniel had seen in old historical documents about witches, and Claire had seen a small part of it on the charm. The symbol was identical to a small part of the witch's charm Claire had found in the house. Gabriel explained that this church once had a secret pact with some ancient witch covens of Salem. That pact was not a collaboration, but an agreement to maintain spiritual balance in the town, so that evil energies would not be completely broken, and injustices would remain undisturbed. The church was responsible for maintaining that balance, and their refusal to help indicated they were hiding something. While Father Jeremiah remained steadfast in his refusal, a younger priest, Father Thomas, with an open mind and curious eyes, listened to Gabriel's and the Blackwood family story. Father Thomas, who always sought deeper truths beyond conventional dogma, was captivated by the sincerity in Gabriel's words and the mystery of Elara Thorne. He sensed Daniel and Claire's despair, and an intuition told him this was no ordinary matter. Father Thomas approached Gabriel, asking more about the supernatural phenomena he had witnessed, about Elara Thorne's past. Finally, Father Thomas agreed to help, but secretly, without Father Jeremiah knowing everything. He didn't want to disobey his superior, but his conscience and desire for truth urged him. Father Thomas promised to search for the church's most ancient documents on soul purification rituals, knowledge that Father Jeremiah had tried to bury. He believed that only then could true peace be brought to Elara Thorne's soul and Lily be saved. Danny, Elle and Claire looked at Father Thomas, their eyes gleaming with a new hope. They knew they had found an ally, someone willing to step into the darkness with them, to face Salem's forgotten past. With Father Thomas's secret help, Gabriel, along with Daniel and Claire, returned to the Blackwood family's ancient house in Salem. The faint moonlight filtered through the ancient trees, casting eerie shadows on the house, making it look even darker and more mysterious. The air was heavy, terrifyingly silent, with only the wind whistling through the old door cracks, like whispers from another war. They knew that the secret underground cellar, where Elara Thorne's witch power was believed to be concentrated and sealed, awaited them. Based on the diagram Lily had drawn in her delirium and the historical records Daniel had found, they located the cellar entrance. It wasn't an easily noticeable door. The entrance was hidden behind an old, heavy bookcase, on the ground floor of the house. And Daniel and Gabriel pushed the bookcase aside. A dark opening appeared, leading down spiral stone steps, sinking deep underground. The smell of dampness and cold earth wafted up, mixed with the foamy lyre pungent scent of burning herbs, making Claire shiver. The cellar was dark, cold, with damp, moss-covered stone walls, creating a suffocating and terrifying space. Their flashlight beam was only enough to illuminate a small part of the large room. The sound of roots crawling, the sound Lily had heard on the first night, was now clearer and more continuous than ever, like bones rattling under the earth, or the sound of a giant creature writhing. Daniel felt the cellar breathing, a terrifying sensation of a living organism, breathing the air of the past. He knew this was no ordinary cellar, but a place imbued with the living energy of an ancient entity. As they ventured deeper into the cellar, a cold and heavy energy enveloped them, making Daniel and Claire cling to each other. Father Thomas began chanting in Latin, his voice trembling but resolute. Gabriel, with a solemn expression, led the way. In the center of the cellar, they saw an ancient stone altar, rough with age. On the altar was an old, partly charred wooden box, fastened shut with layers of iron chains and thorny vines, as if trying to contain something extremely dangerous inside. Above the box, a larger, much more complex witch's charm symbol was carved, emitting a faint reddish-purple glow in the dark. Gabriel said that was where Elara Thorne's spirit was sealed with the original charm, the core of the witch's spiritual power. As they tried to approach the wooden box, a sudden cold gust filled the cellar. From the deepest darkness of the cellar, a blurry, tall figure, wearing a black cloak, with no distinct face, gradually materialized. It was not Elara Thorne, but a faceless guardian, an ancient entity, bound to protect the sealed place. It said nothing, just extended its hand, creating an invisible energy barrier that prevented them from approaching. The barrier caused no pain, but it created an invisible pressure on their chests, making them feel breathless and unable to move. Daniel and Claire recoiled in fear, their eyes looking at Gabriel in despair. Father Thomas, though mentally prepared, also had to step back, his hands trembling. Gabriel looked at the guardian, his eyes fearless. He explained that this was an entity created to keep Elara Thorne's spirit sealed. It had no malice, but it would prevent anyone from trying to release what had been sealed. To overcome it, they couldn't use force, but had to find a way to persuade it, or prove that what they were doing was for a higher purpose, a true liberation rather than a release to cause more hatred. Daniel looked at the guardian, then at Gabriel. He knew that this battle was not just about exorcism, but about understanding, about accepting what had happened in the past, and about finding a path to free both the living and the dead from the chains of injustice. The encounter with the faceless guardian in the cellar presented a new challenge. Gabriel couldn't use force, but had to find a way to overcome its energy barrier. He looked at Daniel and Claire, and signaled Father Thomas to approach. Gabriel explained that, to persuade the guardian, they needed to begin the purification ritual right here, at the center of the ceiling. The very act of demons trotting the will to purify would be an acceptance from the world of the living, a signal that they had no intention of releasing hatred, but of liberating injustice. Gabriel and Father Thomas began the purification ritual in the dark cellar. They sprinkled special cleansing herbs around the stone altar where the sealed box lay, pungent scents dispelling the damp smell of earth. Gabriel chanted in an ancient language, deep and melodious, harmonizing with Father Thomas's Latin, creating a bizarre resonance in the confined space. Daniel and Claire stood beside T.H.M., trying to maintain their composure, closing their eyes tightly to focus on the chants, ignoring the cold and heavy sensation pervading the air. During the ritual, Gabriel revealed a horrifying secret about Elara Thorne's curse. He said that the curse was not just a mere vow of vengeance, but a bloodline connection with those who had lived in this land or were directly related to those who had executed her. Elara's spirit wasn't seeking just anyone. She was seeking descendants, souls carrying a part of the guilty or who had lived on this cursed land. Lily, accidentally, became that connection point, a doorway for Elara to return. It was because of this bloodline connection that the curse became difficult to break. It was deeply ingrained in the nature of the land and the people. Gabriel said, purification was not just about banishing the spirit, but about severing that connection, about breaking the bloodline curse. The cellar's guardian, which had been standing still, suddenly reacted violently as the ritual progressed. Its black-cloaked figure began to move, gliding through the darkness, and creating terrifying illusions. Daniel saw himself being pulled into a bottomless pit, where screams echoed from hell, images of torture, of souls writhing in eternal fire. Claire, on the other hand, saw herself standing on a road filled with charred corpses, their faces contorted in pain, and a voice whispered in her ear, "You will be like us." The guardian was trying to use primal fear and images of death to stop them. Meanwhile, something even more horrifying occurred. Father Thomas, who had been chanting with a resolute expression, suddenly let out a sharp cry. His eyes became clouded, empty, no longer recognizing anyone. He unexpectedly pulled out the small dagger he always carried, a personal protective item, and tried to attack Gabriel. Father Thomas's voice was not his own, but a shrill voice, mixed with the sound of whistling wind, full of rage. "You cannot break the curse. You cannot touch my essence." It seemed the guardian had found a way to manipulate Father Thomas, turning him into a tool again. His own allies. Gabriel had to dodge skillfully, while also trying to neutralize Father Thomas without harming him, a remarkably difficult task amidst the chaos. As the ritual reached its climax, from within the cellar, a series of terrifying images not only appeared as illusions but also projected directly into Daniel and Claire's minds. They saw the charred faces of those who had accused Elara Thorne, the screams echoing from that moment. But the most terrifying thing was not Elara taking revenge. Instead, they saw those people burned alive, not by Elara's direct revenge, but by something else, an invisible force that had carried out justice for her immediately after her death. It was a judgment from another supernatural force, not from Elara, bound to her injustice. Daniel and Claire understood that Elara was not the cause of those deaths, but she was a victim of a brutal system of justice, and her soul had been trapped by a curse far more complex than they had ever imagined. The battle in the underground cellar of the old house had reached its climax. Father Thomas had been manipulated by the guardian, attacking Gabriel, but was finally neutralized. At this point, the light from the handheld torch was only enough to illuminate the old wooden box on the stone altar, where Elara Thorne's spirit was sealed along with the original charm. Gabriel, with an exhausted but resolute expression, looked at Daniel, and their eyes met. It was time to directly confront the centuries-old injustice. Gabriel instructed Daniel on how to break the outer seal of the wooden box. It was not an ordinary physical lock, but enchanted iron chains and thorny vines, connected to the spiritual power of the Uardian and the ancient curse. Daniel, with the help of the cleansing herbs Gabriel gave him, began to remove each layer of the seal. Each time a chain was removed, a cold gust filled the cellar, and the sound of roots crawling, from part 1, became more intense, like scratching from deep underground. When the last seal was removed, the wooden box automatically sprang open, emitting a dry click that echoed in the confined space. From within the box, a thick black smoke rose, swirling violently, carrying the distinctive acrid smell of burning herbs and sulfur. The smoke quickly condensed, forming the shape of a woman, Elara Thorne. She did not have a complete physical body. Instead, she was covered by a peculiar cloak, woven from other trapped souls. Daniel and Claire horrifyingly real. Eyes. These were other wrongfully accused women who had suffered the same fate as Elara Thorne in Salem's brutal witch trials. Each time Elara moved, tormented, distorted faces, desperate eyes appeared from within the cloak, screaming silently, as if they were imprisoned within Elara's own garment, a symphony of injustice. Gabriel stepped forward, confronting Elara Thorne. Daniel, with his historian's knowledge and understanding of Elara's injustice, knew this was the only chance to speak with her, to alleviate some of her hatred. He tried to speak to Elara, not as an exorcist or a victim, but as a witness to history. Daniel mentioned the new historical evidence he had found, the false testimonies of witnesses, the injustice of the trial, and the hidden truths about her innocence. He said that her debt was no longer hatred, but a need for justice, a justice not by blood but by truth. He tried to persuade Elara that her injustice could be resolved in another way, not by causing suffering to the innocent. However, Elara Thorne was unmoved. Her fiery eyes, from her blurry face hidden behind the cloak of souls, stared directly at Daniel and Gabriel. She didn't need an apology, she didn't need understanding. She wanted justice, by burning everything, by returning the pain she had endured. The hatred had consumed her soul, becoming her very essence. Elara extended a bony hand towards Daniel and Claire. Immediately, the temperature in the cellar soared terrifyingly, the damp stone walls began to melt, oozing boiling water droplets. Ancient script, charm symbols, appeared blazing on the stone surface. Like invisible burn spreading. Invisible fire began to erupt from all corners of the cellar, carrying a pungent, acrid smell, as if the cellar itself was burning. It was the fire of hatred, a fire that could not be extinguished by water, but could only burn until everything was consumed. Gabriel knew that words could not sway a soul so consumed by hatred. He looked at Daniel and Claire, his eyes sad but resolute. He understood that it was time to perform the final purification ritual. A ritual that demanded a very high price. Elara Thorne's invisible fire was burning the cellar, melting the stone walls and igniting the ancient symbols. Gabriel knew this was the decisive moment. Words could not sway the centuries-old hatred. To free Elara and save Lily, he had to perform an extremely powerful energy purification ritual, not just to destroy, but to transform pain into peace. He looked at Daniel and Claire, his eyes sad but resolute. Gabriel quickly instructed Daniel and Claire to place all remaining cleansing artifacts he carried into a protective circle around the old wooden box. Dried herbs, rare roots, and ancient enchanted tea. Ones were carefully placed, forming a final barrier against negative energy. Daniel and Claire followed in silence, each doing their part, their hands trembling but still trying to complete the assigned task. The pungent smell of cleansing herbs now mingled with the scent of sulfur and the acrid smell of melting stone, creating a chaotic but also sacred atmosphere. When everything was ready, Gabriel stepped into the center of the protective circle, directly confronting Elara Thorne's blazing figure. He said nothing, just closed his eyes, focusing his mind on the ancient chants. Then he lit the circle of herbs. The fire blazed intensely, not an ordinary fire but a strange, blindingly bright bluish-white flame. The fire did not spread outward, but as if with a will of its own, it drew Elara Thorne's figure in, engulfing her. From within the fire, Elara's screams echoed, but they were not screams of pain as if being burned alive. They were screams of Libera. Tie-in, of a colossal burden being shed, as if centuries of hatred and injustice were being cleansed. As the bluish-white fire enveloped Elara, a horrifying but meaningful phenomenon occurred. The fire began to pull into Gabriel, like an energy vortex. He writhed, his body glowing intensely, veins his skin clearly visible. The old scar on his wrist, where he had been burned in his family's mysterious house fire, flared up violently, with excruciating pain, as if it was being activated. The skin at the scar peeled away in layers, revealing raw red muscle underneath, a gruesome sight. From the corner of Gabriel's mouth oozed a thick, black, tar-like liquid with the smell of burnt ash, he was vomiting out the very malevolent spiritual power he had absorbed. This was his acceptance of becoming the final conduit, absorbing all the remaining malevolent spiritual power and injustice of Elara, to completely free her soul. It was his voluntary sacrifice, an act of atonement not only for himself but also for the sins of the world. Daniel and Claire stood there, horrified witnesses. They saw Gabriel trembling, his body tensing as if undergoing extreme torture, but his gaze remained resolute, and even a rare, serene smile appeared on his gaunt face. They understood that, in that moment, Gabriel was not only saving Lily, but he was also freeing a soul that had been imprisoned for centuries. When the light from Gabriel reached its peak, Elara Thorne's spirit in the fire smiled serenely, a smile no longer filled with hatred but with profound peace. She looked at Gabriel with deep gratitude, then slowly vanished completely into the air, with no lingering resentment. The bluish-white fire died out, and at the same time, Gabriel collapsed to the floor, his body exhausted, his breathing heavy. He was still alive, but his eyes were tired and drained, as if he had just carried a colossal invisible weight. He had taken on a new burden, a part of the injustice that had etched itself deep into his being. The house returned to its normal silence, but a strange sense of peace permeated the space. Daniel and Claire looked at each other, tears in their eyes. They knew a great sacrifice had just occurred, and they had witnessed something beyond all human comprehension. The cleansing fire had died out, and Gabriel collapsed to the floor, his body severely burned and exhausted, but his gaze remained resolute. The gentle scent of lily flowers now replaced the acrid smell, bringing a strange peace. Daniel and Claire rushed to help Gabriel, carrying him out of the cellar and back to their house. Gabriel refused all medical help, the deep, wide burn on his wrist, alone. With the black liquid oozing from the corner of his mouth, was clear evidence of the burden he had just carried. He lay there, breathing heavily, but a strange peace enveloped the space, signaling Had Elara Thorne's soul had been purified. Lily woke up in the hospital, miraculously completely healthy. She no longer had a high fever, no longer coughed up ash, and the blisters on her skin vanished without a trace. Doctors couldn't explain this sudden recovery. They could only consider it a medical miracle. Lily was still a lively, curious girl, but she remembered nothing of the terrifying events that had occurred, of her coma, of Elara Thorne, or of Gabriel. In her memory, it was just a long and strange dream. Daniel and Claire looked at their daughter, their hearts filled with happiness and relief, but also hidden pain and an unnamed heaviness. They knew that although Lily had been saved, the price paid was too great, and one man had borne it for them. The Blackwood family tried to live a normal life, but they knew that a part of the dark past was still there, an invisible scar that would never heal. Daniel, with his historian's instinct and what he had witnessed, sometimes still saw tiny black ash particles shimmering in the air, especially around the house. They were harmless, odorless, just faint shimmering specks, like dancing light dust in the air. They were a reminder of Elara Thorne's existence, of the purified fire of injustice, and of Gabriel's silent sacrifice. They were living ashes, proof of a truth only he could perceive, a that could not be spoken. Claire, with the sensitivity of an artist, occasionally still heard whispers from the earth, from the ancient tree roots in the nearby forest. But those whispers were no longer sounds of hatred or weeping as before. Instead, they were sad, distant melodies, like a lullaby. The voice was faint, blurry, like a song of regret and acceptance. Claire didn't feel afraid and she heard them. She felt a strange peace, as if it were Elara Thorne's soul, after being purified, finding rest, and that singing was her final farewell to this world, a promise that the injustice had been resolved. She often sat in the garden, listening to the earth's whispers, as a way to connect with the past and the sacrifice of souls. Daniel and Claire decided to keep everything about what had happened a secret. They didn't tell Lily, nor did they share with anyone else, afraid that no one would believe them, or afraid that mention it again would revive the calmed haunting. They lived a quieter life, cherishing every peaceful moment. But every time the wind whistled through a door crack, or a black ash particle shimmered in the air, they remembered that night, the fire of hatred, Elara Thorne's injustice, and Gabriel, the peculiar man who had sacrificed himself to bring peace to their family. The ancient house in Salem as no longer haunted by hatred, but it had become a living memorial. It was a testament to a tragic past, to a curse that had been lifted, and to a great sacrifice. Every morning, when the sunlight streamed through Lily's window, where the charm symbol had once appeared, a faint light still shimmered, like a lingering trace of ancient magic. The Blackwood family lived in that imperfect peace, they had been saved, but also knowing they would forever carry the memories and traces of an invisible battle, and the price the debt walker had paid. After Gabriel's purification ritual, the town of Salem, Massachusetts seemed to undergo a subtle but profound change. The heavy atmosphere of the past, the ghost stories that always haunted every corner, gradually faded away. Local residents began to feel a vague sense of relief, a strange peace spreading throughout the town. Chilling ghost stories about witches and vengeful spirits were mentioned less often, as if an invisible burden had been lifted. However, in their place, some new legends began to form, whispered tales of a peculiar man who appeared out of nowhere to help those with spiritual problems, then vanished without a trace. That person asked for nothing in return for his help, no money, no fame. He only left a strange peace in the places he visited, and scars on his body as living proof of the invisible battles he had fought. Those whom Gabriel helped, though they didn't know his name, began to call him the Debt Walker. This moniker spread naturally in small communities, places where stories of ghosts and supernatural events were still believed. They understood that Gabriel was not a literal debt collector. He was one who bore injustices, spiritual pains, karmic debts left behind by the living or the dead. He traveled everywhere to pay these debts by confronting them, bearing their weight, and bringing peace to trapped souls. That moniker was not just a name, but a symbol, a whisper in the darkness about a man who chose to bear the world's pain to atone for his own debt. Occasionally, those whom Gabriel helped would find small, mysterious items left behind. It could be a page from Gabriel's old notebook, with writing in ancient languages and strange symbols. Or psalmody. It was a special kind of herb they had never seen before, with a gentle cleansing scent. It could also be an ancient symbol drawn in charcoal on an old wall, or a small stone carved with strange lines. These items were traces of Gabriel's presence, physical evidence of his intervention in the supernatural world. They were not just souvenirs, but also carried a sense of peace and hope, as a reminder that there was always a debt walker quietly doing his work. Daniel Blackwood, with his support, contributed significantly to the formation and spread of the legend of the debt walker. He didn't directly publicize Gabriel's story, but he collected stories, paired tales of the debt walker from all over the internet, from secret spiritual forums, from historical records he found. He became the scribe and archivist of Gabriel's journey, a gatherer of information about the cases the debt walker had intervened in. He wrote anonymous academic articles, researching supernatural phenomena and the role of spiritual problem solvers in history, indirectly introducing Gabriel's story to the scientific community without revealing his identity. He felt a deep connection to this role, as if he too was part of Gabriel's invisible battle. While Daniel worked silently, Claire also continued the legacy in her own way. She used her ceramic art to create works imbued with cleansing symbols, images of light dispelling darkness, of peace after the storm. Her works were not only beautiful but also carried a strange healing energy, attracting those seeking inner peace. She didn't know about Daniel's collection work, but both were important. Links in spreading the message of the debt walker's presence, and of the hope that injustices could be resolved. They lived a simple life, but their lives had merged into a greater story, a story of salvation and peace that Gabriel was bringing to the world. Gabriel's journey, the debt walker's, was an unending epic. He didn't seek his own liberation, but peace for trapped souls, for unresolved injustices. Every scar on his body was a living testament, a record of past battles, of spiritual debts carried and paid. He continued to wander, following the call of pain, of injustice, to bring balance to the world. Occasionally, Gabriel would revisit the site where his old house had burned down, deep in a secluded corner of a distant town. He said nothing, just stood there in silence, looking at the ashes and remaining debris. His eyes were deep, filled with boundless sadness, as if he was speaking to his deceased family, those who had sacrificed so he could live on, carry this mission. These were private moments, where the dead walker found some peace in the haunting of the past. When Gabriel helped an unjustly tormented soul pass on, the newest scar on his body would fade slightly, and a serene, rare smile would appear on his gaunt face. It wasn't a smile of joy, but a smile of liberation, of a burden just lifted, a debt paid. That subtle transformation was proof that his work was having an effect, that each battle brought a little peace to both the dead and the living. Finally, one day, Gabriel would disappear completely. No one knew where he went. Some said he had found final peace, others believed he had merged with the souls he had helped, becoming part of the invisible world. But the legend of the Debt Walker would continue to spread, from person to person, from generation to generation. And in places where there was injustice, where souls were still trapped, people would find old notebooks, or items bearing scars similar to Gabriel's, scars of fire, of cuts, of punctures, as a reminder that his work continued, forever. That was the eternal legacy of T. He Debt Walker, a promise that justice, in some way, would be served, and trapped souls would finally find salvation. History is not just what we remember, but also the lessons we must face. The story of Elara Thorne's unjust fire is a painful testament to how wrongful judgment can create terrible consequences, last for generations. Daniel Blackwood's ancestors executed Elara because they deemed her a witch, unaware that not all witches were evil, or deserved to be burned. That unwitting act sowed the seeds of hatred, binding Elara's soul to a curse of vengeance, and causing her descendants to bear a debt they never knew they owed. The peace the Blackwood family gained was not from forgetting, but from facing the truth, accepting the burden of the past debt, and through the intervention of Gabriel, the Debt Walker. The lesson he is not just about paying for ancestral sins, but also about compassion and the ability to atone. Elara's fire of hatred was only extinguished when there was a willing sacrifice, an acceptance of bearing pain instead of continuing the cycle of hatred. Gabriel's journey, the Debt Walker's, is a saga of atonement and courage. He found a way to atone for his mistakes, not by forgetting the past, but by becoming a bridge between two worlds, bringing peace to both the living and the dead. He reminds us that there are burdens that are not our own, but sometimes, to find salvation, we must accept bearing them. And perhaps, right now, he is somewhere near you, waiting to help another soul find peace. Listen carefully. Because sometimes, the greatest help comes from those who carry the deepest scars. If you have felt a chill down your spine from this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Whisper Horror channel so you don't miss the next haunting stories. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Do you believe in the Debt Walker? And what debt do you think is waiting to be paid in your life?